Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast, episode 85. In this episode, I speak with Michael J. Masucci. Michael is an award-winning artist and also a founding member of EZTV, which is a 45-year-old media arts group here in Los Angeles. We filmed on location at Michael's studio in Santa Monica, and it was an incredible conversation to say the least. Michael has been on the cutting edge of both art and tech for decades, and it was an honor to sit down with him and have this conversation. I also have to give a huge shout out to Kate Lynch for connecting us. The book of the episode is going to be On the Shortness of Life by Seneca. I picked this book because our conversation with Michael was both very deep and philosophical. This is a very short read, but a very dense one at the same time. Makes you appreciate life and making the most of every day. Again, book of the episode, On the Shortness of Life by Seneca. If you want to listen to this podcast, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you want to watch this podcast, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thesamdeverpodcast. Here's my conversation with Michael. Michael Masucci, welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, and thank you so much for doing this as well, because like I said, there's not going to be an issue of what to talk about. It's like, how do we pick what to talk about? Because as I talk to you more, get to know you better and research everything you've been involved in, there's so many different directions we can go. So I was thinking maybe a good starting off point, if you could maybe just tell a little bit about your background, who you are, and what you do here.
Sure. Well, I'm a Bronx boy. I was born in the South Bronx at a time where I was a rock and roller. But I saw my neighbors taking out old stereo equipment and making stuff on turntables, and I saw the world change a few times. My dad's dream was for me to be a scientist. My dream, not so much. But somewhere in between his dream and my dream, I became very, very comfortable very early with tools. And I don't really like to fetishize about tools, but I was always interested in what's next. And so computers were becoming very, very powerful in ways that hadn't been originally anticipated. And so I found myself not only playing my Fender Stratocaster electric guitar, but playing with some pretty early personal computers, even before the IBM PCs and stuff. Things that Texas Instruments would make, or I was very, very fond of Atari early PC computers, and I learned how to write a little very basic 8-bit code, and I started making what would now be called raves, but we didn't have that term for quite a while afterwards. I was very, very influenced by the art of the 60s, including the psychedelic light shows that would happen at rock concerts, and I tried to imagine, how can I do that electronically? So I really, my first gigs were actually in still photography, and then originally becoming a photomuralist, working for very historical projects with Richard Avedon, Francesco Scavullo, Hero, posthumous collections of Philip Halsman and Ansel Adams, but migrated as quickly as I can. And there was never a design or a plan. I would just stumble into the next step, and found video was really going to answer a lot of my questions, because I made music, video had sound, I made pictures, video had pictures, plus they moved. So I got hooked, and I was all in. I was living in New York in the photography industry, and more and more would get gigs doing these projection events, these early rave type things here in LA. And one day I just stopped commuting and I just stayed here. And I'm a straight guy. I'm a cisgender, white, old dude. But I joined forces with a bunch of young gay men in West Hollywood who were experimenting with video. And together, a thing called EZTV was created. Not to be confused with the illegal BitTorrent of the same name. I have to say that because there literally been times I've been in the middle of a lecture and some blowhard in the audience will scream out, "I just Googled you, you're being sued." And I said, no, that's not us. So We're the older EZTV, much more about independent video, experimenting with what videos can do, and then in my case, really getting interested in what computers can do. And so I not only made work, but I also curated work pretty early and got very, very interested early on in what we would now consider the networked world. So there were things that used to be around called BBSs, electronic bulletin boards, and very simple modems would hook up and people would send text back and forth. And we're talking very early 80s at this point. And we did our first international internet event. It wasn't called, the World Wide Web didn't even exist yet, in 1987, where we hooked up West Hollywood with Sri Lanka to science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. And we started experimenting with a lot of people, and a lot of very visionary people got really interested in what was happening. So everyone from the great beatnik poet Allen Ginsberg to people reinventing how Daffy Duck got done at Warner Brothers, to the legendary Dr. Timothy Leary, to punk rockers, to virtually every local computer artist came through our doors and collaborated. And it became this family that in some cases, among us still alive, there are people I've been collaborating with now for over 40 years.
Wow. So you mentioned Ginsberg. That was another one. Him and Timothy Leary, they crossed paths, didn't they?
Well, they must have. To be honest, I never saw them in the same room together.
Okay.
Now, I assume they did know each other, but I don't know that for a fact. But they both knew us. So Allen Ginsberg came to our door through an amazing man named Lewis McAdams, who passed a few years ago. Lewis was among the youngest generation of the beat poets, and he knew all the Titans, Kerouac, knew Ginsberg very well, all of these people. And Lewis was, among many, many other things, an environmental activist early on. And if you go over to the Los Angeles River on one side, there's a place called Lewis McAdams Park now, because Lewis did something which he called the 40-year artwork, where it took him 40 years of doing performances and writing to get the federal government to allocate billions of dollars to clean up the LA River. So he knew Allen Ginsberg. He was doing, in the early 80s, Lewis was doing a documentary on Jack Kerouac, and he took Allen in to show him a rough cut. And then a few years later, we collaborated with him alongside with a legendary rock producer at the time named Don Was. And we did a concert of Allen's work, not him reciting poetry, although some were reciting, but him singing. And I think Allen Ginsberg was a genius. I think he was an amazing talent. He could not sing to save his life. But people loved it, and a good time was had by all. But yeah, so Allen was another side of the quadrant. Tim was much more in the center towards the end of the early days, as I would put it, the early 90s and stuff.
And how did you first get connected with him?
Well, I first met Timothy Leary in 1987. We had programmed a show in our gallery called Computer Superstars, which was curated by a Spanish digital artist named Montro Ah. And one of the artists was Georgianne Dean, and she borrowed a computer from Timothy Leary. Timothy had an arrangement with Amiga computers, and he got either free or very low cost access to what were at the time state-of-the-art computers I could never afford. And so Tim loaned Georgianne Dean a computer, and I met him at the opening and stuff, but we didn't really get to know each other till a little bit while after, when during the run of the show, the computer got stolen. Now, we were renegades back then. We didn't have insurance. We didn't have anything like that. And back then, that computer cost in 1987 money, about $6,000, which to me at that time might as well have been $1 million.
Right.
So I had the wonderful task of calling up Tim to tell him his computer was stolen. And it was like, Dr. Leary, call me Tim. Yeah, Dr. Leary, Tim. Call me Tim. I have bad news. What happened? Your computer is gone. What do you mean? Well, probably somebody stole it because it's not here. And I'm saying, oh, okay. And then I just go into my thing, say, sir, I don't know how. I swear to you, I'm going to pay you every penny of that. It may take me a while. I don't have any money, but I'm going to do the best I can. And he just interrupts me. He says, I heard some stuff about you. You're good with this video stuff, right? And I said, well, that's what I do. Yeah, I like to think I'm good. He said, okay, why don't we do this? I have friends from time to time need video service. If I send them your way, you'll take care of them and we'll take it off the bill. I said, yeah, absolutely. I expected this would take 3 years to pay him off. I don't hear from him again for about 3 weeks. No, 3 months. I'm sorry. 3 months. I get a call. I got a friend in from Sweden. He needs a couple of hours of editing. You can do that? Yeah, of course, Tim. Send him right over. So I do 3 hours of editing with this guy. And then I get a call from Tim about 2 days later. He says, well, I heard everything went really well, so we're even. I said, what do you mean? I said, 3 hours of my time is not worth $6,000. And he said, well, it should be. And not only that, I got an extra computer and I'm giving it to you. And I have that computer right up there. And that computer changed my life because I was suddenly able to do things that, from a production standpoint, that were well beyond my financial situation. And I was able to take on projects and make work that totally transformed my life. And then we became friends. And from time to time, the next couple of years, I would entice him to do silly things. I got him to play God in a multimedia performance. And then he said, I want to do a series at EZTV called How to Operate Your Brain. And he ultimately went on and wrote a book by the same name, totally unrelated to this series.
And now that was the one you read. That's the book that yeah.
Okay. So Tim did a series called How to Operate Your Brain at EZTV, which were these amazing experiments in psychedelic imagery and very loud music and performance. And through that, he met these young people who became his last family, a group of young artists called Retinal Logic, who showed up to one of our events, and they immediately hit it off. And Tim, he became a real supporter of us. When our late founder, John Doerr, died of AIDS on New Year's Day, 1993, I was on a trajectory in this new multimedia performance dance world, and I thought that was going to be what I was going to do. And 2 days after John Doerr died, Tim calls me up and says, come over for some drinks. I've got my best Irish whiskey here. We need to talk. And he laid it right out, and he was right. He said, let's face it, Michael, you're not going to leave EZTV. That's not going to happen. You're not going to let it die. You're going to save it. He said, you don't know how, I don't know how, but let's just cut to the chase. That's what's going to happen. So you've got to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And he was right. And here we are. My God, this is 2024. We're talking 1993. And it's a much smaller EZTV than it was back then. But EZTV, this is now our 45th year. It may end up being our last year. I'm not sure. I don't want to do this forever. I might want to do something else when I grow up. But we made it to 45. A lot of people say push it to 50. We'll see. But Tim was one of the leading reasons that I did keep it going.
Yeah, that's incredible. So Tim really, played a critical, pivotal part in your career, all because a computer got stolen, right?
All because of Georgianne Dean's computer that she borrowed from Tim disappeared one day. And he was such an amazing guy. Now, I've heard a few people badmouth him, and I'm not saying what they say didn't happen. It's just I never saw that side of him. The side I saw was nothing but gracious and generous and non-egotistical. He would say stuff to me like, I don't want to be your leader. I want to be your cheerleader. And he would really do that. He would throw these salons almost all the time. And he would try to curate the party so that people would meet each other. So I'd be in the middle of working and he'd call and say, come over right now. There's somebody you got to meet. And I said, Tim, I'm in the middle of work. He said, oh, screw that. Come over right now. Yeah. And there was that side of him that he didn't understand the word no. And that was a blessing to him because it amazed people, it inspired people, and it allowed him to never stop being inquisitive. So he was a very early adopter of computers, very early understander of the networked world of Web 1.0 and how websites were going to change everything and how digital culture was going to change everything. He was a titan, and yeah, I owe a great deal to him. Absolutely.
And so what were some, even before meeting Tim, what were some, and you said the psychedelic light shows and things of that nature. So could you maybe take us through the evolution of the types of projects you were doing?
Oh, sure.
Over the decades, even leading up to now.
Sure, absolutely. And there is a thread.
Right.
So I did a project for several years in the nightclubs in New York, LA, and to a smaller extent, Boston and DC. I did this project called Standing Waves, where I hot rodded a rig of some analog video production equipment and some very simple, basic computers, which were the only ones available to the public at that time, and some very, very early video synthesizers. And I would make these abstract images in real time. What kind of cool about them is that it was real time. I was making them live, so it was kind of a performance. And I would do it at the clubs. I'd have my rig, and people would joke I was the Jimi Hendrix of video because I was very physical, moving the cameras and getting feedback and all this stuff. And, I'm an art fart. I'm very much informed by the 20th century's contemporary art space practices. And I was very, very influenced and informed by Jackson Pollock's action painting. The idea that his paintings were actually the results of a performance. He didn't paint, he performed. And the result was a painting when it was over. And I was fancying myself the electronic version of that. So I was making these very abstract images in a very physical way. And I paid my rent that way for several years. I then slowly migrated more and more towards working with performance artists. And I would do, many projects were one-on-ones, and decidedly they were with women. I'm a straight man. They were either straight or bisexual women, whatever. But I would do these pieces about gender identity, about the complexity of what it is to be a human being and grapple with your hormones and your emotions and all of the preconceptions you were brainwashed into believing. And I did a number of series of projects where what I called them were internal portraits, where I would get to know a person and then together, and they were largely, a lot of the ideas absolutely came from them, but we would create these video art performance pieces. And they became a mainstay of a lot of my work in the 80s, through the 90s, and I still do them to this day. But then there was another a tread that was a little bit more conspiracy theory oriented. Back before there were 12 different shows on the History Channel about UFOs, I have a whole body of work about UFOs. And I was an agnostic. I saw something's going on, but I didn't claim to know. But I claimed to want to kind of investigate. And before it became very popular to have all these documentaries on the History Channel and Discovery and all that stuff, a lot of people were very reluctant to talk about what they felt happened to them. So what I would do is I would gain their trust. I would say, tell me your story. I will never use your name. I will never use your location. I'm going to take your story turn it into something more poetic, and then hand it over to performance artists and contemporary dancers, and we're going to tell your story to the world, but expressionistically. And I did that for a long time. I was very, very interested in how do we tell the unthinkable in a way that is non-traumatizing, that is perhaps in a strange way a healing, and how do we investigate what's really going on? And I got, after a little notoriety from that, there were some people at what was then UFO magazine that would then turn me on to the leading thinkers in the field. So throughout the 80s and 90s, I interviewed virtually every person in the field of UFO thinking, but would still mainly focus on making these expressionistic, poetic, almost abstract pieces. And there was a world for that. So some of those pieces showed in more like in art galleries. Some of them showed at conferences. Some of them, we would talk about the technology, about how I made them, and show them at what would now be considered more tech conferences. And it was a way for me to get these ideas into audiences that were not accustomed to them yet. And it was a very simple, feeble way prior to like the TV shows that exist now of mainstreaming what was still underground ideas. And I've always been interested in underground ideas because I don't claim to know what is true and not true. I've looked a lot of people in the eye and they've told me things and they may be dead wrong, but they believed every word they told me. I know that. And I know there's some semblance of truth to what they said. But rather than being a judge, I wanted to be a witness and a voice and to share my stage with them. So that was another very, very long body of work. But then there was the curator side of me throughout the whole thing, that I was always interested in what other people were doing. And when I saw something I liked, I wanted to show it. So the strange thing about the early EZTV, which was much, much larger than this room we're in today, it was a 3-floor facility with a 100-seat theater, a separate computer art gallery, 5 editing rooms, a music laboratory, a black and white dark room, offices. It was a center.
Sounds incredible.
It was incredible. And it was all done DIY. And we did have some major mainstream clients, and people would laugh. We were like Robin Hood. We would have Miramax and Warner Brothers and people like that thought it was hip to edit at EZTV. And then we would turn around and hand over the same equipment for free to some young artist. And that was the ethos. The ethos was very much rob from the rich, although we weren't robbing; they were paying us, and try to spread the wealth. And there was this interesting dialogue that was happening between the mainstream and the underground. So there's a group that's 51 years old now called SIGGRAPH, and SIG, S-I-G, in front of a word is old nerd talk for special interest group. So the entire name of SIGGRAPH is the Association of Computing Machinery's Special Interest Group in Computer Graphics and Interactive Techniques. I always advised them to get a change of name, but they never listened. SIGGRAPH was anyone and everyone involved in computer graphics, from the big boys working for Cameron and Lucas and Spielberg, down through all the academics and the engineers inventing the technology, the code writers inventing the software, to us. And we were this enormous family that exists to this day. And things would happen like during the development of Cameron's Titanic, some of the computer animators would call up after they got off work and say, you still around? Yeah, I'm going to be here for a while. So we want to show you some stuff. and they'd show us the wireframes of making the ships and the motion capture of the people on the deck. And they'd say, this is where it's going. Now, your computers can't do this. We have giant server farms and supercomputers doing this stuff. You can't do this yet, but there have to be ways to trickle down some of this. And there have to be some cheap and dirty ways to do similar things. And so we had this conversation back and forth where they informed us and we also informed them about how DIY can streamline certain aspects. And this amazing conversation has now lasted. In our case, we've been collaborating with Cigarette for 40 years. And in a few months, we're going to be having a 1-month art show, which is a 40-year retrospective of collaborations that we've done with them. So my interest as a curator and an investigator and a kind of the term I used to throw around is that what I do is art as anthropology. I'm not an anthropologist by training or in any sense of the word, but it's really what I'm more interested in is like culture. I don't care if something is good or not. I care why you think it's good or not. I don't care why a certain culture is aggregating around a certain technology. I want to know why are they doing it? I'm interested in the anthropology of technology, the anthropology of art, and this incestuous relationship that exists between art and science. Now, one thing I get in trouble with sometimes is that if I were strategic and if I were really a careerist, I would throw around the term art and tech like it was God's gift from heaven. But I don't, because I think it misses a fundamental understanding. There never was a time when art and technology were not completely collaborating, overlapping. And if I were in a different audience, I would say something a little foul-mouthed, but I'll spare you. But the Getty does every once in a while these amazing events, and I'm a big fan of that. So Getty, don't think I'm putting you down. I'm not, but hear me. The Getty does a thing every once in a while called Pacific Standard Time around a basic theme. So the first one was in 2011, and the theme was LA Art 1940 to 1980. And they wanted to really celebrate the leading creative voices in LA from 1940 to 1980. EZTV began in 1979, so we just made the cut. So we were in this enormous initiative where the Getty inspires venues all over the region, from Santa Barbara to San Diego, from Santa Monica, where we're sitting now, to Palm Springs. Over 70 organizations, every museum, every university, every gallery of note, all agreeing to do something on that theme. So this year, the Getty is doing a theme called Art and Science Collide. I don't think art and science collides. I think it makes love. I don't think it's a battle. I don't think it's a turf war. I think it's this incredible fusion of creativity, because I think any good artist has a scientific perspective, and any good scientist is part artist. And I think it's a continuum. It's not that world or this world. It's a world we call creativity. And some people make poetry out of numbers. They're called mathematicians. Some make them out of words. They're called poets. But it's seeing the innate underlying DNA of whatever is underneath all of this. And I don't want to get metaphysical, but I don't think it's just this. I think the universe is far more complex than we can possibly imagine. And that, yes, some mystics have insights, and maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but there is an underlying reason. And physicists discover that and they call them the laws of science. Force equals mass times acceleration. Well, that's a reason. It's a poetry. It's something underneath us all. And I'm very intrigued with that.
Well, it makes complete sense, and because as you're telling me this story, what you guys are doing with like the UFOs and the other, you were using art, but you were investigating, you were discovering, which some would say, oh, that's what a scientist does. But then, you see a scientist, what they do, certain experiments, or if you're a chemist or whatever it is, some may consider that an art.
Yes.
So they really do go hand in hand. You guys are trying to get to the root of what makes things work and the root of humanity.
Right. And there are different ways to tell. I don't know how many human languages there are. Many, 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 many human languages. Well, dance is also a language. Physics is also a language. Poetry. It's all ways for people to try to communicate with each other. I know there are some artists who say, I don't care what my audience thinks. I don't believe them. I don't believe you make something just for yourself. I think you want someone else to experience it. And I think the more we collaborate, and the more that scientists collaborate with artists, and the more that artists collaborate with anthropologists, with social scientists, with homeless people, with people coming from very different worlds, I think we have a fighting chance that we're going to pull this thing off, because right now the odds aren't looking too good for this species. Now, I'm an optimist. I do think we're going to pull it off. But right now, I can't look you in the eye and tell you how. I don't see the answers. I see too many reasons it's going to really mess up. And we only need one. But somehow I have faith in this human spirit. I have faith that there are going to be voices through art and through science that inspire, that kick it down the road a little bit further, because that's all we've ever been doing. We've never solved problems. We kick it down the road, which is okay. There was a time a few hundred years ago that the smartest people around thought cities were going to have to go extinct. We were going to have to abandon London because it's completely polluted from horse manure. When the horse was the dominant mode of transportation, well, horses do things. And the cities, they couldn't figure out sewerage. They couldn't figure out how to deal with this. And people really thought, cities are over. We can't control this. And then they figured out underground sewer systems. And then lo and behold, we kicked it down the can with the automobile. And then the automobile started polluting. And now we're going to electric vehicles. Now they're going to have their costs too. And then we'll just kick it down the road again and again and again. And I'm sure that's what's going to happen. I don't think this world is going to detonate. I don't think we're going to nuke the planet. I don't think climate change is going to destroy the human race. But I'd be ridiculously foolish to think we're not going to have some serious problems. But I do think somehow they'll be solved. And for me, art and science working together is how that happens. And I love that collaborative spirit.
That's wonderful. And it reminds me of what we were talking about before we were rolling, about there's just different level of geniuses, right? I mean, a mechanic is a genius in their own sense.
Absolutely.
A farmer is a genius in their own sense. Not
Absolutely.
every genius is PhDs in mathematics, which that is a level of genius, of course.
Right.
But I agree with you.
one kind. Yes. Yeah.
And as we're talking to it, it's making me realize more and more, like, every human experience is its own unique thing we can learn and pull from.
We need to celebrate, there's a word that sometimes gets overused, but you almost can't overuse it, and that's diversity. And It just doesn't mean cultural diversity. It just doesn't mean where your ancestors came from. It doesn't mean what your sexual preference is, what your gender is. But there are so many other kinds of diversity too. All of those I just mentioned all need to be celebrated. But taste in music is a diversity. Taste in politics, for better or worse, is a diversity. All of these different ideas, our philosophical constructs, our belief systems, our religions, how we define this incredible challenge. And late in life, I face an existential reality that I'm not happy with, which is that I now, without a shadow of a doubt, believe I am going to go to my end not knowing how this all happened. I am not a person of faith. I respect people who are. I do believe there is something far greater than all of this, but I don't claim to know what it is. I don't claim to know its name. I don't claim to know how long it's been around or anything like that. But I'm very, very sure I'm not going to know the answers. And that's very troubling from somebody who, as a young person, thought he knew it all. You know, as a young man, I thought I was pretty smart. And then I realized just how dumb I am. And now I realize that the greatest questions of our lives, I will never know the answer to. And dare I say, no one listening to this will either. And that's not something to applaud or say, isn't that great? But I think as soon as we acknowledge that, as soon as we cop to the fact of just how little we know, I think we might begin to ask the questions that'll create the next epoch. Because every major idea came from an existential crisis where suddenly the answers weren't there anymore. It just isn't adding up. We have to abandon it. So the earth was flat until people realized, well, you know, it really isn't. You know, it looks flat. It kind of objectively makes sense, but no, it isn't. And no, the earth isn't the center of the universe. It revolves around a star, and that star is only one very, very, very tiny glint of light among an incalculable number of others. And we used to think we were the center of the universe, and now we realize just how small we are.
Oh yeah,
That's a big step.
When they really paint the picture of our planet, our solar system, you're like, oh, that's huge. Excuse me, that's humongous. Well, then you have your galaxy. Okay, even bigger. Wow,
Right.
and then there's trillions of
Trillions. The latest numbers, it's like, what? Maybe 3 trillion galaxies. Each one has hundreds of billions of stars. Each star has 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 planets. We are nothing.
And it's constantly expanding.
Right. And that's the known universe, whatever that means. I want to hear a conversation about the unknown universe, you know?
So do you think it's possible for anyone to understand all this stuff? Like in the future, do you think there'll ever be anybody that understands how we got here in life and all the questions that we don't know?
Well, off the record, even though we're, yeah, I do believe it's possible. I don't claim to have ever met anyone.
Sure.
But I don't practice regularly enough meditation. I pretend I do. But I do know that there are people in other parts of the world who spend 6, 8 hours a day in a different place than we do. And they've been doing that for 30 or 40 years. And they have profound capabilities we cannot do. They can alter their temperature. They can stop breathing. They can exist without water. They could do all these things that are supposedly medically impossible. Do I think they have a better handle than I do? Yeah, I do. Do I think they have it all figured out? I'm not sure there is an all figure out.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we are so, understandably, we define ourselves by what's around us, by our observation. So everything we see has a beginning, a middle, and the end. We're born, we die. Everything deteriorates. So we assume this finality. That may not be true.
And the act of observing something affects the thing you're observing. So that itself,
Heisenberg, yeah.
Yeah, so like that itself just constantly will keep it moving to where like, yeah, I don't subscribe to think that, I'm not sure if it is possible. That's what I would subscribe to, is like it's impossible just because it's infinite. Right. Like I don't know, but then maybe not. Like,
I don't either.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I know it's impossible for me.
Sure.
I know that when I stop breathing, I will have not reached this enlightenment. I know that. Has anyone ever in human history? I don't know. I'm, even though this is kind of a fib, I say I am in all things an agnostic. There are certain things I do have beliefs on, but I try to well, I'm probably wrong, so I'm not going to talk about that stuff. But normally I say, I don't know. Is there a God? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Is there life after that? I don't know. So has anyone among the billions and billions of people that have ever lived figured it out? I don't know. But it might be possible. It's just not possible for me. And I'm comfortable with that,
It kind of makes, it's death, hopefully it's a privilege to live and to die. And even though we are all like so scared of it, but like it kind of makes death kind of interesting to just be like, well, will I know more when I die? Will I see, what will I see? Like it kind of, that's what it makes me, that's what you remind me of talking about. It's like, yeah, will I
love what you're saying. It is it's the ultimate trip. It's the biggest gamble. Now, I've met people, as I'm sure you both have, who claim to know what happens after you die and claim to, oh, great, maybe they do. I don't. I don't know. I have feelings. I've certainly, we talked about Timothy Leary before. Yes, I have taken LSD. Not in a long time, but have I had profound experiences I can't explain? Yes. Do I necessarily believe absolutely they're true? I can't. They felt real. They felt very profound. They led me to believe that I certainly believe this is not me, that I am some sort of energy field. Now, whether that energy field is immortal, I don't know. Does it reincarnate? I don't know. But absolutely, as a younger person experimenting with various chemicals and things, I did believe I had experiences that absolutely convinced me that there's an aspect of us all that is immortal. But I leave it open-ended. I'm not going to try to convince you.
Well, it seems to be kind of reassuring to think that, right?
It is
it's almost in
right.
your it's advantageous for you to think that way.
It is. It does help you get through the day.
Yeah, right.
It does.
It's like, why not?
Then, because the alternative, which is frankly also very plausible,
Yeah.
The alternative is that this really has no meaning. You die and then that's it. Well, then it had no meaning. So when I say I'm an agnostic and then I say I fib, well, I prefer to believe, although I can never prove it and would never try to proselytize or prove it to anybody else, I do believe, whatever you want to call it, the soul, the spirit, this inner spark, I do believe there is something that is of this universal source that, regardless of what you think of the Big Bang, I tend to think it's kind of yet another fairy tale. It's a little bit too convenient. I believe there's something that is eternal. And we come from that.
And ties everything together.
Yeah, exactly. But but I'm always skeptical of people who try to convince other people.
I don't buy it
You
for a
know,
second.
I
Any of them. Yeah.
don't like professional mystics and professional religious people, and but I love having conversations.
Absolutely, because that's that diversity you're talking
Right.
about, like that point of view you would never think of. But yeah, I like their behavior. There's something like very needy almost going on, like they need to be right. At least that's what I kind of find. So it's like, well, that right there is like a red flag. Like how could I trust this? Like you need to be right so bad. Like
then you're probably wrong.
You can't.
You need to be right so bad.
Right,
You're probably wrong.
right.
Yeah.
Like we said, before, it's the more someone in the room acts like they know, the more I realize that they don't know. I know I don't know.
I know.
But I also know you definitely
Right.
don't know. And this whole conversation, you seem like the perfect person to ask this, because Eric and I have been throwing this question around. I love reading books. Eric's read tons of books too. But as of late, we're wondering, well, can you read too much? Is there
I don't think so. I don't. It's a great question.
Because it gets to that line where you can study, but at what point do you start taking action and making your own discoveries instead of reading about?
There's the question.
You know what I mean? Like, where's that? In your opinion, is there a balance to that?
Yeah, there is, but I think it probably varies for all kinds of people.
Yeah.
So, and I think it really is a question of circumstance. Like before it started rolling, we talked about how, there is the real in-person visceral experience. Like I was privileged to be able at one point to buy a plane ticket and go to Cairo and then take a short hop to Giza and see the Sphinx. I feel very privileged to have done that. But if I had never done that, I could have experienced a pretty good experience seeing really good pictures and films and VR immersion, So I think if you can have a first-person experience, it is always the most visceral and I hate to use words like pure, but that's the word that's coming to mind. It's the purest experience. But if you can't, read a book or see a film, or as, Apple Vision Pro gets better and better and its competitors get these amazing experiences, but understand always there's two sides to every coin. And for every benefit, books have enlightened people. Books have also, created the Holocaust. Books can make you fall in love. Books can also make you a racist. So we always understand that books or films or music or somebody talking, a podcast, VR, take everything in balance, take everything conditionally, to be reevaluated, to be reconsidered with more information. Maybe let's listen to the opposing view for a change and not live in silos. But I don't think that there's such a thing as too much information, but there's definitely something to too much bad information. And we, as a society and many societies around the world, and I'm not getting into politics, but we are suffering from too much bad information. And it's too easy to digest, and it's more and more difficult to vet what is real and what is disinformation or deep fakes. I have a dear friend who used to work as an operative in creating disinformation, and he feels that the government has a right to lie to us, that there are certain things we shouldn't know, and it's in our best interest. He truly believes that. I don't. I believe the truth shall set you free. But I could be wrong. He could be right. I think as long as we don't vilify opposing views, which is what we've done, we now live in a world where if I disagree with you in one little aspect, you might as well be the devil incarnate, instead of, well, let's talk about it a little more, let's find maybe some common ground. and agree to disagree to what we disagree with. But
And I think that goes to the point what you're saying about diversity and being able to talk to all these different segments of people, because that's really the only way we're going to progress.
I think
But
you're
when
right.
everyone's alienated, we're not going anywhere.
Right.
You can come up with the iPhone 28, whatever it's going to be, which that will be here sooner than we think.
Sooner than you, yeah.
And people will be lined around the block to get it.
And it may be implanted in your brain. It may be an implant at that point.
Yeah, but it's like, because like we're all saying, no one has this figured out. Even if they think the only way we're even going to get close is by sharing the information and having the conversations and not putting judgment upon people just because they have a viewpoint different than yours. Like you said, like, well, hey, can you tell me why you think that?
Yeah, let's have a conversation instead of an argument. And people need to get more comfortable with being wrong. I'm wrong all the time. You're wrong all the time. Let's just cop to it. I have a friend who will never admit that he's ever wrong. And I said, well, don't you think that's a little neurotic? And he gets I am not neurotic. Okay, let's change the subject. Nice day today, huh? But I think we need to be comfortable with the fact that we mess up a lot. We get things wrong. We slack off, we're not every day operating at 100%. And then maybe we can do a little better.
See, I have a theory on that. I think it's we talked about this yesterday. It's like this all or nothing thinking. So if he's wrong, then now his identity is wrong. So it's like so he grips onto it because and I struggle with this too. I think we all do. It's like you really have to separate. Like, yeah, you can have a bad moment or like be wrong. It doesn't make you a wrong person.
It doesn't make you bad.
But I know it's like logically speaking that makes so much sense. But like emotionally, I think a lot of us struggle with that to where it's like, no, I can't be this even for a moment because that makes me that entirely. You identify with it overly. And then, and I think that's why people grip to their political views or whatever it is. And you can't ever admit that something could be wrong because it's not even really about that thing that you're arguing about. It's more about just you. Like,
I think you're so right.
It's like it becomes so completely emotional.
So right. It is emotional.
Yeah.
It's not intellectual. It's not rational. It is purely survival.
Yes.
Fight and flee. I am, being threatened.
Yes, that the reptilian brain is in full
I agree.
And I have to get this out just because what we've just talked about reminds me of it. I had an acting teacher once, and I'm paraphrasing him. He said, "You're born and then you die. Everything in between, art is your interpretation of that."
I love that. Oh, I love that.
And when it changed my...
I love that.
And there's no right or wrong answer. It's your interpretation. And everyone's going to have a different experience.
Yeah, and you can change. What's right for you last year could be different next year. We're evolving. We're learning. Or if we're not, we're in trouble.
Right.
I think too many people have become I figured it all out. I know everything I need to. Don't confuse me with facts. I know everything already. Okay.
Right.
It scares me.
And I think this might be a good segue because, AI.
Okay. All right.
These things, social media. And I'm really curious to get because you've been here with this technology for decades now. So you've seen it, everything lead up to this point.
No, absolutely.
Trying to think which there's 10,000 directions we can go.
A million questions with just.
So I guess I'll start with where we're at today with the smartphone technology and how, and even as I was thinking, for example, TikTok, that was one app. I'm like, I will never get on TikTok. They're just doing dances on there. It's stupid, yada, yada, yada. But then I had a couple of people say, no, it's actually a really good technology. It's amazing what you can do. And then I actually got on TikTok and there's way more on there than what it was categorized as. I'm like, no, this is actually really innovative. It's really, really, really cool. So, and it's the younger people that adopted it early. So you have to be able to see and be open to what's being developed without having it totally consume you at the same time. So I'm just curious to start this direction is what's your take on where technology is now?
Okay. I think technology is largely a very good thing, and it's where it's always been. It is in the hand of the user. So fire revolutionized the human species. I believe that this combination of the networked world, the internet, and AI, and to now I separate them no more. I think we now are in a very different internet than we were 3 years ago. When we think about ChatGPT is about a year and 4 months old. And we act like we've always had it. And we largely haven't had it in our lives, but we now take it so much as a given. AI is not going away. AI is going to become more and more integrated into us. And when I say what I'm about to say, people at first misinterpret what I'm saying, and then I hopefully get enough in to explain, and they say, oh, okay. We are already cyborgs. We are no longer purely biological entities. The fact that every one of us has one of these things chained to us, and how much time anyone I know in this Western world or in the technological parts of Asia or any part of the world now that is highly technological, how long can they go without picking this thing up and checking something? We are only a few technological innovations away from this no longer being separated from us. So last year, as you probably know, Elon Musk's Neuralink technology was finally put on a human being. I haven't heard updates as what's going on, but we are going to enter. To me, fire was one of the most innovative changes. We are now in the next change that's significant. When I was younger, people used to say that computers were the biggest innovation since the printing press. Wow, brother, we are so far beyond the printing press now in how we have changed. And it's so weird because we call these phones, these are supercomputers.
Right. Yeah.
These are film production systems. These are telecommunication devices. These are broadcast systems. These are libraries. This is not a phone. A phone is one app on this thing. And more, we will not be separated from this. And we are coming to the point where we will be fused literally. It will be inside us. Whether first it's, the goggles, and then it's a contact lens, and then it's literally an implant, or literally manipulating DNA codes so that the electronics are biological. We are cyborgs. And the biggest philosophical question that I'm not a parent, but any parent must have is, how young do I allow my kid to stop being a purely biological human?
It's so easy at the restaurant when the kid's crying, just put that iPad in front of them. It's a pacifier, it's so easy.
Babysitter, addictor.
Yeah.
I have a friend and a colleague named Win Schwartow, and I'm an old guy. I met Win in high school a very, very long time ago. And we went to a school where we were all supposed to become scientists. He sort of did. He's more like a philosopher scientist. I became an art freak, but I use science. Win is one of the pioneers in cybersecurity and information security. Back in 1991, Win testified in Congress about the incredible benefits and the dangers of this new technology that people were rapidly adapting called the internet. And he basically predicted the world we take for granted. He said, there's going to be financial scams. There's going to be political terrorism. There's going to be bullying. There's going to be pedophilia. There's going to be, discrimination. There's going to be bullying. And some blowhard congressman says to him quite classically, Mr. Schwartau, why would bad guys ever use the internet? And here we are today in a world where Russia and North Korea and Iran and China clearly have manipulated political elections in the United States and many other countries, where organized crime basically has transmitted to become web designers, where sex trafficking, where gun trafficking, where, and don't even start with the dark web. I'm talking about what you can Google. What you can't Google is mind-boggling. So Wynn is now talking about Web 3.0, the metaverse, this new immersive stuff. And if Facebook is addictive, and it is, and psychologists now have an absolute designation for a mental disorder, which is social media addiction. It is a thing. And there are many, many kids who cannot put down their phone, who are in death scrolling all damn day. And if their thing doesn't instantly get liked, they are traumatized. And if their girlfriend looks prettier than they do, they have, we have a real decision we have to make sooner rather than later. As the new technologies, which are going to be wonderful, are they going to revolutionize medicine? Of course, they already are. Are they going to revolutionize everything in many good ways? Of course. But we've already got the corporations to tell us how great the stuff is. Zuckerberg will tell us how wonderful his stuff is. Great. We don't need to echo that. We need to raise the flags of, but what about the bad stuff? Not to be naysayers, not to be doom and gloomers, but to just be responsible adults who, those of you who are parents, oversee the lives of very vulnerable little people that don't yet have the critical thinking skills to be able to make decisions. So I think as AI becomes completely transparent and integrated into everything we do, and everything we are fed is completely data-mined and customized based on our preference profiles, we need to get it. We need to get, we are being manipulated. We are the products. We are products that are being sold back to ourselves. So our likes are a commodity that are data mined, analyzed, algorithmic decisions are made, and then it feeds back to us so that we continue to buy more and more of what we already buy. And I'm a capitalist. I got nothing against people selling me stuff. I'd like to sell my art to people. I'm happy to buy other people's stuff. But I don't like being brainwashed, and I don't like being made a fool. And we have to understand that everything we do online, we are being manipulated. We just have to keep an open eye. It's not like, don't use the internet. Of course use it. Of course use all this stuff. But understand, just like fire can cook your food and warm your body, it can burn down your house. Every tool is a weapon when it's designed to be used that way. Every tool, a hammer, a screwdriver, amazing things. It's not just guns, you can harm people with anything. And long answer, but that's what I think. But I'm all in with tech,
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking on the drive here, with podcasting now, there's all these different AI tools you can use.
Right.
And in some things it makes sense. But I seem to run into people who view it on both ends of the spectrum. There's some like all in, put the Neuralink in my brain now. Like,
Right.
let's go. And then some that are like, wait a minute. He's like, some think we may get a little too lenient or dependent on AI.
No.
And, I was talking with Eric, even when you're creating videos, there are certain parts of the process that, yes, it's tedious and it's time consuming, but by you actually doing it, you understand your product better instead of something just telling you what your product's going to be. So I guess what I'm trying to lead to as an artist, how do you see AI playing a role? Because yes, there can be tools, but what if it just gets to the point where people just hit a button, oh, there's your art now.
And
there's a
that's definitely
process to
happening.
art, and that's part of the love of it, right? Is the process of it, the creating of it.
For maybe it's old school, but yes, for me it is. The journey is the point in a creation. Now, AI art is here. Generative art is here. I know some people making very interesting work in it. Do I use it? I do, but I don't call that my art. There is a backlash in the art world. The biggest art fair that happens in LA happened about a month ago here in LA, called Freeze, which is a international thing. It tours everywhere. But it was almost all oil paintings. It was very old school. And that is a very conscious decision. So when you can type in 3 or 4 sentences, and yes, the art of that is figuring out the most descriptive way of phrasing something, and you can get an incredibly photorealistic, industrial light and magic quality, state-of-the-art image in 12 seconds. That's not going away. But that may not be art as we used to call it. It is creative, but there's something about the flaws, the mistakes that made signatures of artists in the past. So
like the human element, essentially.
Right, that human feel.
Yeah.
We had this conversation when I was young over drums. When the drum machine got invented, 2 camps, just like AI. A drum machine is absolutely perfect, rock steady beat. Human beings can't do that. So then they had to put into the drum machines, the later versions, human feel. They had to make them a little less perfect. But there are plenty of DJs who prefer the absolutely perfect beat. So when you go to a lot of DJ concerts, there is nothing human about any of that sound. It is absolutely to the microsecond, rock steady on the beat. Jazz people, not so much. They like ebb and flow. Bring it in, bring it out, pull it back, drive it forward. Sing the music. There's room for both. I listen to both. I'm a musician myself. Over a decade ago, I decided, I have to learn how to write computer code to write my music. And so I took an online class. I've taken many online classes. I have ridiculous drawers full of worthless pieces of paper. But I decided I was going to take a class at CalArts Online about computer music. And I wrote this 1,000 lines of code to make this piece of music. And after doing that, I said, yeah, but I could have just sat down at the keyboard and just done it. So I don't exercise that skill that I learned. I use musical instruments because I can play them. But I don't have any problem with somebody who just writes it with code. All I care about is if I like it. What I keep saying to people with this whole art and tech conversation, I don't care how you do it. I don't care how you make your art. I only care if I like it. I have a friend who's really into like electronic music in a very academic-y way. And most of the stuff that I've listened to that she likes, I can't stand. It's like, I don't care how many banks of computers you use. It's crappy music to me, you know?
You know, some of those guys, though, they actually physically push the buttons like on those. And I do think so their human rhythm does get into it. And that's probably why certain producers or whatever they're called are more successful than others, because they actually have something very beautiful in their rhythm. So when they are pressing on that 808 or whatever, there is a human element there.
Yes.
And then assuming that they don't do some sort of like autocorrect that like moves it all around, but they might do some sort of augmenting, but like there's still a human element because they're pushing the buttons and stuff.
Right.
Like, I don't know. There's
so
still
I like
something.
that too.
Yeah.
But you know, I have friends who are all in with the most robotic music you can imagine. Great. That's what they like. It's like, again, I want us to find less and less ways to have issues with each other. So you like that kind of music? Great. I don't, you know, and I'm not going to vilify you or think you're stupid or you have bad taste or anything. It's nonsense. It's just taste. It's what you like and what I like. And I think we need to think more about why an artist makes something rather than how they made it.
I love that.
And this has been a problem I've had with a lot of dear, dear friends throughout this journey of these many, many decades of digital art, is that I know too many of my colleagues who, when they talk about their work, they don't sound like artists. They sound like engineers. I love engineers, but call yourself an engineer. Don't call you know, they're not talking about why they made the piece. They're talking about the frame rate and the buffers that they used and the code they used. And it's all very interesting, but that's mechanics, which is a very important thing. Like we said before, they're incredibly intelligent. They're incredibly creative, but they may not really be artists. They may be making artistic things, but as pieces of engineering. And that's all valid. And it's all, to me, whether you like it or not. And a lot of the AI generative art that I've seen, so it doesn't do anything for me. And because I realize how easy it is to make a lot of this stuff, the snob in me is like not impressed, you know? But if you like it, great. It's not going away.
This is actually from a TikTok clip out of all things, but this guy goes, I may be crazy and I may be off, but I'm putting a bet down that what's going to happen, this is just could or could not, everyone's going to go all in on the AI, and we'll just use art, for example, and just going to make nothing but AI art. But he goes, after a while, it's going to just get repetitive to a lot of people, and the people that are still doing, quote unquote, the original stuff, people will go back to that because now that's the different thing. It's going to be interesting just to watch it play out.
It's going to be very interesting because I think you're right, but I think it's going to be an all of the above. Now, the sort of, we all have egos and we all have this narcissistic tendency that we're so amazing. When everyone has instant real-time photorealistic filmmaking capability with AI, I think an awful lot of people are going to spend an awful lot of time just looking at their own stuff and not looking at anybody else's. I think they go, oh, look, did you see what I just made? No, I'm too busy looking at what I just made. I think there's going to be a lot of that because the narcissism of social media, I think, is going to migrate into these capabilities. So people who are really obsessed with telling everybody what they had for lunch and taking pictures of it and all that, they're just going to be sharing what they did. And no one's going to be watching it because everyone's just going to be watching what they themselves did. And I think that's going to be happening too. Yes, there are definitely going to be people who are going to be inquisitive and going to want to see creativity and see but I think a lot of people are going to be really happy just living in their own world and have this loop of the music is music they've just invented and the film is film they just, and it's like and they're going to love every minute of it because it's them. And it's going to be very entertaining.
Yeah, that's it's so funny. When I was getting ready to come over here, I was thinking about that, because we've all been involved in film here. We know the process of shooting something, then loading it onto a computer and editing it. Now with the phones, I mean, I'm not going to lie. Some of the stuff I see that you can do now on the apps, I'm like, and I just saw recently, was it the Apple 15 Pro that shoots that really good? I mean, it's incredible. And I'm like, well, now it's so easy, and it will just automatically take all your clips and loop it and put music, and it looks really good.
Right.
So I know it makes complete sense with what you're saying. The more people, and it's a beautiful thing at the same time, because certain people that never would have even thought they were going to create anything like that can now create something. So I guess there is good in it too.
I agree.
I think you're right.
I'm not saying, oh, tear it down. No, I agree. It is beautiful. The question I think we're all grappling with, and we're all dancing around this, is do we need to change the definition of what an artist is? Do we need to eliminate the name artist? Is now, the idea. Earlier today, somebody said to me, because of this stuff, everyone's an artist. And then I said, well, then also no one is an artist. Great. It's like both. It's cool. Okay, I don't care. But do we need to have this sort of subset of people that do just like mess around with stuff and come up with stuff on their own that wasn't an algorithm doing 90% of the work? Because what I am quickly seeing with some AI artists, not all of them, some AI artists really think they did this. They said, this is my work. No, it's a sentence you wrote, and it's the work of a lot of people you will never meet, and sourcing a lot of imaging from the net. There was an interesting thing. I had a roommate for a while, and we would hang out. I'd take pictures of her, and they're just sitting in my phone. And I was playing with one of the really cheap AI programs. I think it's called Photo Leap. And I was making a cyborg robot, what everyone makes. Everyone makes a cyborg robot. And it had Edith's face on it. And I showed it to her, and she said, oh, shit, that's me. And so it went into my phone. And I'm sure in the I agree thing, you've got 40 minutes of words that nobody reads.
No one
we
reads.
Just check, I agree. It says, yeah, and we can source your stuff. We can check your files. And it was clearly her face. So the imagery is coming from out there. And I know there are some artists who have identified their images being used in other people's, and they're suing. And the future of intellectual property, which is a whole other show.
A whole other topic.
That's a whole other thing. Whether intellectual property as we know it is impossible to protect or not, probably. Remains to be seen. But the ego that I've seen happen where people think this is my work. Okay, cool. Have a party. But it isn't. It isn't. They contributed to it, but many, many other people did too. And so maybe it's our collective unconsciousness happening technologically, but these are real questions, very important questions.
Yeah, and I love what you said about not how you're making the art, why.
It's all I care about.
And I'm just curious too. We're just gonna have to watch it unfold, but if we'll see maybe some of the purists say, you know what, screw all the technology, just give me a canvas and back to the Pollock. To Pollock, be like, screw the machine, screw the man.
It is. I swear to you, it is one of the biggest controversies in the art world today. And there were several art fairs that banned AI, that you were not allowed to submit an image. Now, I did a little sneaky thing with Frieze. There was a side section of Frieze that was at the hotel where the administrators and the people running it stayed, and there was a small exhibition that this art center put together. So I submitted a piece that I made with AI. I don't think I was supposed to, but I didn't. I just said digital image. just to see what would happen. And they took it. But there is clearly, and I understand the reasoning, a very visceral, political, emotional backlash for what people are calling human intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. There is a whole bunch of artists that only want to make things with their hands. I think there's room for everybody, but this is definitely happening. There is a backlash.
Was there a backlash when like Photoshop first came out and stuff like that? And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So every step of the way, the same thing happens. So when photography was first invented, no, that's cheating. You got to be able to draw. Then photography got accepted, and it very craft, a lot of technical and artistic and creative know-how happened. And then automatic cameras came, and it's like, well, that's not real. That's not real photography. Okay. And then when manipulated photography happened, when editing happened, it was like, oh, that's not a real photograph. You know, I don't have enough time in the day to worry about those kinds of things. Again, I only care if I like it. If you show me an image and every aspect of it was synthetic, I don't care. If I like it, I like it. Or if every piece was hand rendered and it took 12 years to make and I don't like it, doesn't mean anything.
You know, that's a very good point. I'm actually, it actually makes me rethink the whole thing, because really, sure, the era that I was in, this is how you did it. But now for people entering into their film eras, whatever it is, this is how it's done.
Right.
So, yeah, I know when you said the whole, I could see how there was butted heads. Well, that's a very good point Eric brought up there, because, yeah, there's always been a debate in some sense. But now we're just getting to a point where it can just take over all of it. No one does anything.
I don't, you know, I already know lower end graphic artists who are out of business because you can make stock images with AI instantly and for nothing. So why would I pay somebody? So on the lower end, there's already hard times. On the super high end, of course, Hollywood's all in on this stuff too. So compositors, various kinds of CG artists, people that did wireframe removal, people that did all of this like busy work that was highly skilled. Well, AI can do it. So why should I pay somebody six figures when I can get a $60 a month subscription to a piece of algorithm that will do it better.
Certainly faster. Yeah.
Right. And in medicine too. So I met a gentleman who's a professor of engineering at USC who was among the people who helped develop the AI program that can analyze medical x-rays. And at first I was like, oh, I don't want a robot doing that. And he said, Michael, you got to understand something. He said, not every radiologist was top of their class. Not every radiologist walks into work not having just had a fight with their significant other or a toothache, or say human beings, medical doctors, licensed, experienced medical doctors operate inconsistently. This piece of software not only learns, but is always at optimum. He said, I'm sorry, Michael, you're wrong. This does a better job than many, not all, but many of the human licensed medical doctor radiologists in the world. Get over it. You are going to want your x-ray analyzed by this, and then second opinioned by a human being. So there is that argument.
No, it's funny you bring that up, because that actually, I was in a conversation similar to that, you know, when it comes to the medical side of things. And if it doesn't miss, I'm probably going to want to go with that. But like you said, have that human take a look and analyze. And someone said something interesting. I'm butchering what they said, but they're like, but we're using AI just to replace everything at some point, well, what are we going to do eventually?
Big question.
And
Big question. I don't know the answer, but I've fears. About 2 years ago, there was an NFT conference downtown, and I was asked to be interviewed for a podcast that was more about investing, but to give my thoughts, And just before I got up to do the interview, to be interviewed, some keynote blowhard was saying, in 15 years, 50% of the jobs as we know it will disappear. That's great news. You know why? Because it means we're all going to be creatives. Well, not if we're not being paid to be creatives. Not if you have an AI thing and you just make stuff. And who's going to pay creatives when everyone can do it? And everyone can do it at an incredibly high production value and instantly and cheap. I don't know what the future is going to be. I am always very suspicious of anyone who claims they know the future. I certainly don't. And I'm old enough to have heard the future predicted so many times. I'm old enough. I'm of the generation where we were promised by the 1990s, everyone's going to have a flying car, hotels on the moon,
Flying skateboard.
disease, poverty, disease,
Jetsons.
war, all gone. Yeah? And nobody predicted the internet. Got to remember some of the big faux pas in corporate history. The head of IBM saying, this is pretty accurate, it's not an exact quote, but pretty accurate, I don't really see a need for maybe more like maybe a dozen computers on the planet. Head of IBM. When they were basically making typewriters. What do we need to do? And then the biggest mess up in corporate history, a little company called Xerox. Basically computing as we know it, the point and click, the drag, the cut and paste, all invented at Xerox. And the CEO looked at it and said, what are we going to do with that? We make copy machines. So no, this is the future. Nah, there's no Apple. Nobody's going to want this to do this. What, people are going to want computers in their homes? Why? What for? It's ridiculous. And then his other famous quote, and Xerox will never sell a product called a mouse. And then two young guys named Steve and Steve walked in, and they offered to buy Xerox's invention. And the engineers who developed this stuff begged management, you're selling away the future. Don't do this. Oh, you guys are crazy. So today, at the time that happened, Xerox was number 53 in the Fortune 500. Today, Apple is number 8 and the most recognizable brand name on the planet, and Xerox is no longer in the Fortune 500. The biggest screw up in corporate history. Xerox should have been the biggest company in the world today, and they're not. So predicting, I'll leave it to the fortune tellers. They usually get it wrong.
I'm pulling from one of your, I'm not AI, I swear. I'm pulling from one of your lectures. You mentioned the movie Space Odyssey 2001.
Yeah.
I love that movie, by the way. I agree.
One of my favorites, yeah.
Just, the three scenes, but so, well, not in also the intro, just the intro before you even get to the first scene.
There's so many, there's so many.
It's a visual and intellectual experience to the finest.
Absolutely.
And I like what you said, and you're going to probably have to correct me, but you said something along the lines of artistically they got it right, but they were wrong.
Right.
With the future.
Exactly.
Similar to what we're all talking about here.
I consider 2001 one of the 2 or 3 greatest science fiction films of all time. I never pick a one. There's a bunch that are great. I consider it a work of art. I consider it a work of poetry. I consider it a work of metaphysics. But last time I heard in the year 2001, we didn't have a giant space station being built in orbit. The space station we do have in 2024, it's kind of cool, but it's a joke. It's a bunch of buses welded together. Last time I heard in 2001, we didn't have regular space hops over to the moon where there were bases. No, they got it all wrong. And that was the best evidence they had. The prediction, they consulted with the top futurists. They really tried to get it right. But from a technological aspect, those picture phone machines, AT&T, you put a coin in and you got a big, none of that happened. None of it happened. And again, in 2001, do you see anything like the internet? No. Although 2001 was kind of early. But no, there were plenty of people had it by then. Plenty of people had the internet by then. Futurists are rarely right because they're looking forward by looking backward. And the unintended consequences and the unexpected innovations and COVID or the Russians hacking our electoral system or all the things that nobody puts in the equation is why it's almost impossible to look ahead.
We're obsessed with it though, aren't we? Aren't people just obsessed with predicting the future?
Sure. I mean, I try.
We all do.
We all do, sure. Yeah. But it's, you look at the big predictions that have been around, they never happened. Flying cars, I'm still being told, oh yeah, it's right around the corner. I've been told that my whole life. Flying cars are right around the corner. You know? But they're not. Will some rich people have some soon? Yeah. But will it replace our highways in our lifetimes? I don't know, maybe yours. Not mine. No. It's and there's nothing wrong with trying to predict. Again, I'm not vilifying these people. I just don't take them very seriously. And I don't see how you can ever get it right because it's what is unexpected that affects everything more than the linear go where it's going, you know?
Well, like the pandemic.
Like the pandemic.
Like we were saying,
how that
like,
changed everything.
Things have moved forward, but it's different.
Right.
Yeah.
And who knows, Zoom may not have been as popular today if we never were locked indoors for 2 years.
Oh, I don't think so. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What's the deal with Skype? Didn't they? I feel like they had like that market share.
They did.
What'd they do? Like, how'd they fuck that up? Like, what happened?
I can't answer you. I mean, I use Skype. I used to use it. It seemed to work perfectly fine. Then one day everyone was using Zoom, so I was using Zoom. I have no idea why Zoom got the market share. What they did with branding, I don't know. But like we were saying before you started shooting, you know, it's not always the first to the party that gets big, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The quote I recently heard was, just because you're first doesn't mean you're the best.
Yeah.
And a lot of times
That's
I
right.
think the first ones are the ones that take the fall. They're the ones that fall on the sword because they may have been the spark.
Right.
But then someone goes, oh, I can do that, but I
That's
can do it even better.
And there's an expression that, you know, this may have come from Hollywood, but it's nobody wants to be first. Everyone wants to be second. Everyone wants to see you go try and flop. Okay, don't do that. See what they messed up. Don't do that. Oh, that kind of works. Oh, okay. All right. So Disney just made a movie with ants. We're Pixar. We're going to make a movie with ants. Great. Ants sell.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be the king. They want to be the prince. Because then you have like the looking forward to be the king someday. But everybody wants to kill the king. So you're just kind of chilling.
Waiting for
Right.
your
And
turn.
somebody else builds the kingdom for you.
Yeah.
The kingdom's built. You just take it over.
And I have to pull up one more thing I wanted to bring up with you too, from one of your lectures. You were talking about going to the moon.
Yeah.
And a big thing, a lot of people say, well, why don't we still go?
Right.
Why don't we have space stations? And you said something that really made me think. Back when they were doing that, they had the will to do it. They were motivated to do it. People were banding together, the space race, like everything to get to the moon. And it's like, we got there. It's like, all right, that's it. Do you have any current thoughts on, this our ambition for space? And obviously Elon and Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna go back. We're gonna call it. I mean, I think what was supposed to happen in 2001 will happen maybe in 2050. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't believe we're going to have large numbers of people living there next year or in 10 years, in 20, maybe, I don't know. Why did we stop? Well, we can get conspiratorial.
Yes, we can.
We can talk about all of the disclosure things. We can talk about, did in fact Neil Armstrong see things that he shouldn't have? Are there very difficult to explain photographs that then got photoshopped that show very strange phenomena? I don't know. But I'm open to that. I think we stopped going because of a change in political ideology, that there were many people, understandably, the civil rights movement, in social justice, saying, why aren't we taking care of what's here? Why are we spending so much money going to Iraq? Now, if we went there and there was forests and water, maybe they would have. And now, of course, they found water, but it's not easy to mine it. But I think there was a social rejection of what the perception of the payoff was, even though technologically there were immense payoffs. So I think that's the official answer. The official answer is that the country really turned more inward and more into, we've got to solve our own problems here on our planet before we go do that. Now, I know they say the space program was really expensive. Governments spend lots of money on all kinds of stuff. So I don't know if it was that expensive. But clearly something stopped. And again, the agnostic in me, which of these I believe? I don't believe any of them. Any of them are possible. I don't have an opinion. It's possible we never stopped. It's possible there has been a secret space program all along. It's possible we had the ability to build these things in 1966. Why would we stop? Wouldn't we have the capability to build them faster, cheaper, better today? We claim no, but that doesn't seem to be how engineering and manufacturing works. So maybe it went covert. Maybe for various military reasons, it became more a military project than a scientific project. Maybe we never stopped. Maybe we found things that were too controversial to deal with in a public way. Maybe we were told to not come back. Or maybe it just wasn't sexy enough after the third or fourth moon landing. After the third or fourth moon landing, okay, we brought back a bunch more rocks. Okay, we got a rover and we're going, sand dune buggying. And, maybe it just wasn't enough juice for the American public after the first landing. I'm old enough I watched the first landing live on TV. It was amazing, but the snot-nosed, cynical, hippie kid in me was like, yeah, it's cool. It's not that cool. And I don't know the answer. I absolutely believe we went to the moon. I'm not one of those people that think that you mentioned 2001. I don't think Stanley Kubrick filmed the moon landing.
I've heard that one. Yeah.
But I do believe there was a backup plan in case it didn't work. I don't believe, since it was a live broadcast, that they were ever going to tolerate failure on live TV. I don't believe they were ever going to show an astronaut die on live TV or a ship crash on live TV or it just didn't work. No.
There was a
I
backup
believe
plan.
there was a studio ready to roll. I just don't think they needed to. But if I were them, I certainly would have had a backup ready to go. And then maybe decide whether to disclose later. But the fact that they did that live, they had no plan on failing. So I think that.
It's a really reasonable outlook on it. 'Cause, you know, people are usually extreme on both ends. Oh, it happened without a doubt. If you question it,
Right.
yada, yada, yada. And some are like, no way it happened. And
Hey, I wasn't there. I don't know about you guys. I didn't go to the moon. I wasn't. I take their word for it, but I also, you know, I see all of the conspiracy stuff. I do see some of the moon rocks are fake. You know, there's stuff that's like some of the supposed doctored footage. It looks at it, and I know enough about light. Yeah, there are 2 light sources in that picture. So last time I looked, we only have one sun. I don't know what the story is with this picture. I'm not saying they're all fake, but that one's got 2 light sources. You know, I try to keep an open mind, and I take to heart. I mentioned a friend of mine who, you know, used to be in disinformation for our government. The government does lie. And they believe they have every reason to. They lied about the Vietnam War. They lied about the Gulf of Tonkin. They lied about Remember the Maine back in the Spanish American War. You know, doesn't mean they're the devil. Doesn't mean they're evil. They believe they're doing the right thing for whatever their reasons. But I wasn't there.
yeah, no, this is incredible, Michael. I could
appreciate
make
this.
sure. If you got a few more minutes, is there anything else you want to bring up or talk about, or something that you have coming up
Yeah.
that you wanted to speak about?
When this airs, it'll probably either already begun or soon to begin, or if people watch this way down the road, it will have happened. Starting June 22nd, we're going to unveil something we've been working on for about 5 years with SIGGRAPH. We're going to create an annual digital arts festival here in Santa Monica called DNA. And DNA is going to acknowledge the past, where this world all came from, but also celebrate and showcase the best and brightest of the new. And it's an initiative with 3 very large cultural institutions here in Santa Monica College, the 18th Street Arts Center, where we are now, which is the largest nonprofit cultural center in this area, and the Bergamot Station Arts Center, which is the largest collection of art galleries on the West Coast. And those are the big 800-pound gorillas, and there's some smaller community groups also involved. And we really want a non-elitist, inclusive, friendly, diverse conversation about digital art, everything from AI, the things we've been talking about, show the classics, show the new stuff, not get too nerdy, not get too into the weeds, but there'll be some of that for the scholar types. And we're real happy about this, and we really want, it's about time digital art takes its place among all the other art mediums in the art world as for what it is. The major art most people perceive. Most people see digital photographs. Most people watch digital videos. Many people have never seen a frame of 35 millimeter film projected in their life. They've only seen digital projection. Digital art is the center of art, and I think it's time we celebrate that. But thanks you for letting me say that.
Yeah, no, that sounds incredible. And definitely something we'd like to attend or go to or check out. It sounds really cool. And I just feel very grateful for you opening your space here for us to have this conversation.
I really appreciate both of you, and I'd like to thank Kate Lynch for introducing us.
Yes, thank you,
She's
Kate Lynch.
a brilliant person with many, many skills in many areas, and a force of nature and a force to be reckoned with. And I thank you, Kate, for introducing us. I had a great time.
No,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
And I always give the guests the last word. But before I do, if people want to reach out or check out more of what you do here with the EZTV Online Museum or anything else, where should they go?
So website www.eztvmuseum.com. And then for the Digital Arts Festival, DNAFestivalSM.com. And that's just, well, by the time this airs, that'll be up and running. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you both.
Absolutely.
Real pleasure.
It's
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
And I always do give the guests the last word. So if there's any, it can be as deep or as shallow as you want. It can be a thought you've been having. It can be absolutely anything.
I'll go with the late great Duke Ellington to kind of riff off the idea, not how, why. I think he said it best. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And I think that's where we are. Thank you all.
Michael, thank you. Hi, everyone. Sam Dever, the Sam Dever Podcast here, and I just want to thank you for checking out this episode. To watch and listen to future episodes, be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thesamdeverpodcast. Thank you so much. See you soon.